I still remember the smell of my old house, the faint scent of jasmine that used to linger in the evenings, the sound of wind chimes outside the kitchen window, and the echo of laughter that once filled its rooms. I had built that house with my husband 45 years ago, brick by brick, dream by dream. It was my pride, my comfort, my proof that life had been kind at least once. But now, I sit here in a quiet care home where the walls smell of disinfectant and loneliness, wondering how my own children could lock me away just to strip me of everything I had left. It didn't happen overnight. Betrayal rarely does. It comes softly, wrapped in gentle voices and false assurances. When my husband Youssef passed away 5 years ago, I was broken but not defeated. I told myself I still had purpose. My children. My eldest son, Aslam, always said, "Ami, you've done enough. Now it's our turn to take care of you." His wife, Rida, nodded along, her smile too perfect to be true. My daughter, Sana, lived abroad and rarely visited, but her calls were full of affection and promises. "We'll make sure you're comfortable, Ami. Don't worry about anything." I believed them, foolishly. At first, they treated me like a queen. They visited every week, brought fruits and medicines, talked sweetly about how I should relax and enjoy my peace. I didn't see the storm gathering behind their smiles. But it came, slowly, cruelly, hidden beneath love. One afternoon, Aslam came with some papers. "Just signatures, Ami," he said casually. "Bank stuff, for your pension." I didn't even wear my glasses. I trusted him. My own son. I signed. That signature would later become the key that locked me out of my life. Weeks passed before I noticed anything strange. The jewellery box I kept since my wedding day, a heavy wooden chest engraved with golden vines, was missing from my cupboard. I asked the maid. She said Aslam took it for safekeeping. My heart twisted, but I told myself not to overthink. After all, what mother doubts her son? But something changed after that. The visits stopped. My phone calls went unanswered. One evening, I sat by the window waiting for Aslam's car. It never came. Only silence. And that silence stretched into days, then weeks. When they finally returned, it wasn't for tea or love. It was with a plan. "Ami, you need more care now," Rida said, her voice too soft to be kind. "You forget things, you get dizzy. What if something happens when you're alone?" I tried to argue, but Aslam cut me off. "It's final, Ami. We found a beautiful home, people your age, good nurses. You'll be safe there." Safe. The word stabbed me. Still, I let them take me. The car ride to the home was quiet. I stared out the window, my heart pounding with confusion and dread. The building loomed ahead, a dull beige structure with barred windows and a gate that clicked shut behind me like a prison door. I didn't realise then that I wasn't going there for care. I was being abandoned. The first night was the hardest. I kept thinking this was temporary, that they'd return once they realised their mistake. But days turned into weeks. No visits, no calls. The caretaker, a kind woman named Shazia, told me gently, "Your son paid 6 months in advance. He said he'll visit when he's less busy." 6 months. That was when I knew something was terribly wrong. I asked Shazia for a phone to call Aslam, but she said mine was left behind. Every time I tried to contact them, I was told, "They're busy, Ami, rest." My jewellery, my documents, everything, gone. I spent my nights crying silently, clutching my husband's old photograph, praying he'd somehow guide me. My dreams turned dark, visions of my house being emptied, strangers walking through my rooms, my memories being sold piece by piece. And one morning, as the sun filtered through the curtains, I overheard 2 nurses whispering near my door. They sold her house last week, one said. Her son handled everything. Poor woman doesn't even know. My heart stopped. Sold? My house? I felt a rush of blood to my head. I stumbled to the door, clutching the frame, demanding, "What did you just say?" They exchanged nervous glances, mumbling, "We didn't mean—" "Please, sit down, Auntie." But I already knew. I could feel the truth burning through my chest. My children had locked me here to sell everything I had built. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, feeling my world collapse around me. Betrayal, I learned, doesn't shout. It whispers in your own child's voice, smiling while it destroys you. The next morning, I woke before the nurses did, the room still bluish with that quiet before dawn light that makes everything look honest. I lay very still and listened to the building breathe, the faraway hum of the boiler, a cart rolling down the corridor, the soft cough of my neighbour across the hall. I counted my breaths to steady the trembling in my hands. If my house was really sold, then whatever time I had left would be measured in small humiliations. I would not allow it, not while my mind still woke me before the sun. Shazia came in with tea, her steps careful, her face carrying the sort of tenderness people reserve for someone they expect to break. "You slept at all?" she asked. I shook my head. She set the cup on the table and hovered, as if wanting to say more. I watched the steam twist up like a whispered prayer. "You heard, didn't you?" I said. "About my house." She lowered her eyes. "I'm not supposed to know anything about outside matters." "But you do." My voice surprised me, calmer than I felt. "And you're kind enough to bring me the truth instead of syrup." Shazia looked toward the door, then closed it with her hip. "I shouldn't, but I think you deserve to know." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. "This was left at the front desk by a courier. It's addressed to your son, but they signed the surname wrong. The receptionist asked me to check if it belonged here. She swallowed. "I saw your name inside." My fingers fumbled. The paper creaked like old bones as I opened it. A sale deed. The address printed was mine. The buyer's name was a company I didn't recognize, something shiny and forgettable. The signatures at the bottom burned my eyes. Mine, slanted and confident, as if I'd been eager to hand away my life. "My son brought me papers to sign," I whispered. "He said pension formalities." Shazia risked a glance at the corridor. "There's more. The nurses said your son and his wife came last week with a jewellery appraiser. They had a list of items, very precise. The appraiser brought a portable scale." I closed my eyes. For a moment I felt the old weight of my wedding necklace against my throat, the cool kiss of gold on my collarbone, the way my mother had clasped it with hands that trembled for an opposite reason, with joy. I had worn it on the day each of my babies was born. Aslam had once tugged it in his tiny fist and giggled, toothless and pure. The memory cut me like fine wire. "Bring me a pen," I said, "and a notebook." Shazia obeyed without question. I wrote down everything I could remember: dates, times, names, the brand of car Aslam drove when he last came, the joke the guard made as the gate clicked shut, the soft seam of Rida's expensive handbag, the colour of Sana's silence on the phone. I wrote until my hand ached and the letters grew too large. When I finally looked up, my tea was cold. "I need a phone," I said. Shazia hesitated. "The administration doesn't allow personal phones for some residents." "I'm not some resident," I snapped, then immediately felt the shame heat my face. "I'm sorry, please. I'm not ill in the mind." I tapped my temple. "This is the sharpest thing left on me." Shazia nodded. "There's a young man on night duty, Imran. He cleans the floors and knows all the locks that stick. He bends rules when bending them is kind. I'll ask." That night the corridor flickered with half-sleeping lights. Imran slipped into my room like a shadow carrying a heartbeat. He was wiry, with careful eyes and a respectful tilt to his head. From his pocket he drew an old phone, the kind that had real buttons. "This is my uncle's," he said. "The SIM is still active. Don't call long, don't get caught." My hands shook as I dialed Aslam. The ringtone marched through my skull like soldiers. He didn't answer. I tried again, then Sana. Voicemail. The silence on the other end felt deliberate, as if they had relocated me not just in space, but in the map of their lives, an address they had wiped with one stroke. I left a message anyway, my voice steady. "Aslam, it's your mother. I know about the sale. I know about the jewelry. Call me. Return the keys you took from me, even if they no longer open anything." I paused, then added very softly, "I remember when you were afraid of thunder, and I held you until you slept. I am not thunder. You don't have to hide." Imran shifted as if the words embarrassed him with their nakedness. "Do you want me to try another number?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to try remembering more than they hoped I would." The days that followed were small missions sewn together like old lace. I learned the corridors, the shift changes, which nurse lingered at the medicine cart to gossip, and which one could be distracted by praise. I asked questions, not directly about my house, but around it, about couriers, deliveries, unusual visitors. People like to speak when they think they are comforting you with unimportant details. I also made friends. Zahida in 12B, who hummed old film songs and had a son who loved her fiercely, proof that goodness still occurred in this broken world. And Fazana in 9C, who waited every evening by the window for a husband dead 10 years, smiling at crows as if they were bringing her news. They treated me like a woman who had not lost her life but misplaced it temporarily, and that faith steadied me more than any medicine. One afternoon, I saw the administrator's door ajar. Inside, on a metal shelf, sat a stack of files bound with rubber bands, names scrawled on their spines. I recognized my surname on the third bundle. My feet moved before my fear could argue. I knocked and stepped in. The administrator, a portly man with carefully arranged hair, looked up with the tired hospitality of a shopkeeper. "Yes, Auntie." "I need to verify my medical details," I said. "What allergies you have on file?" He blinked, perhaps surprised by the specificity. "Of course." He turned to a computer and clicked, then frowned. "One moment, your file isn't digitized yet." He reached for the bundles and, without suspicion, handed me mine. "Here." The weight of it made my heart stumble. I sat in the chair and opened the folder to a world I did not know belonged to me. Forms my children had filled, boxes ticked that did not describe me, summaries of assessments I had never attended. On the third page, a note in tidy handwriting. "Patient exhibits mild confusion, forgetfulness. Recommended assisted living. Family to manage finances and valuables." My breath snagged. Below the note was a consent form with a signature that screamed my name in every curve. And yet, not mine. It was too smooth, too rehearsed, as if someone had practiced my unpracticed hand. "Take your time," the administrator said, friendly, bored. "I'll be right back, tea." When the door shut, I moved faster than my bones believed they could. I slid that one page into my sleeve, pressing my elbow tight to keep it flat against my skin. My pulse pounded in my ears, a drum summoning the old me, the woman who once argued the price of cement and kept a ledger so clean even the bank manager praised it. I returned the file, thanked him, and walked away, feeling the paper like a secret vein against my arm. In my room, I unfolded it. On the bottom margin, there was a witness signature. Reader. Of course. My own daughter-in-law had witnessed my consent to my own disappearance. Imran came that evening with his cautious smile. I showed him the paper. His eyebrows lifted in a soundless whistle. "This is serious, Auntie." Serious is why I am still breathing, I said, and surprised us both by almost laughing. Can you help me do one more dangerous thing? He leaned in. Tell me. Take me to my house. He started. At night? The gate man knows me, but… Take me to what used to be my house, I corrected myself, because precision is a kind of dignity. I need to see it with my eyes. I need to know if the world as I remember it still exists in any corner. He measured my face with his gaze, as though determining if it would break under wind. Tomorrow, he said at last, after 3, when the night guard drinks his heavy tea. I did not sleep that night either, but this time the insomnia felt like proof of life. I lay awake making a map inside my head. How we would slip past the back staircase, which tiles squeaked, where Shazia would leave the laundry room door unlatched. I thought of the jasmine by my kitchen window. If the house had been sold, perhaps someone had ripped out the old shrubs to make room for something shinier. But jasmine is stubborn. It burrows deep. It blooms even for the unworthy. At 3, the building drowsed. Imran appeared in a dark jacket that made him part of the hallway. I had wrapped my shawl tight and put on my shoes, the old leather cracked, grateful for purpose again. Shazia met us by the laundry with a folded scarf and a small tin. Brown sugar for the guard, she murmured, his weakness. We moved like people listening to their own footsteps and disappointed by the noise. The back gate gave a reluctant sigh and then opened to the night. The air hit my face like a confession. Somewhere a dog barked once, annoyed by the audacity of our hope. Imran's uncle's motorbike was older than honesty. He insisted I take the seat in front, between his arms like a parcel too precious to strap. We cut through the sleeping streets, past closed shops and piled fruit crates, and the lonely glow of a 24-hour chemist. As the city thinned and the familiar turns returned to my muscles, my throat grew tight. A part of me feared the house would not be there at all, that I had imagined my life. Another part feared it would be there exactly, only wearing someone else's laughter. When we turned into the lane, I closed my eyes for a heartbeat, the way one does when stepping into cold water. Then I opened them. My house stood where it always had, but it was wearing a new face. The gate had been painted a graceless grey. The porch light, once a warm yellow, had been replaced by a sterile white glare that made the front steps look like an interrogation. The jasmine had been hacked down to stubs. In the window where I used to hang lace curtains, a cardboard box was propped open, and inside it I saw the corner of a photograph frame, gold-edged, like the ones I kept in my drawing room. "Stop," I said, and Imran cut the engine. The night swallowed the sound. We sat across the lane, shadows in a shadow. My eyes drank every treachery. A moving truck was parked outside, its mouth yawning, swallowing furniture I recognized by silhouette. My carved rosewood chair, the little table with the uneven leg Yusuf had sworn he would fix and never did, our stubborn life being loaded like inventory. The door opened and a woman stepped out carrying a small box. She was not Rita. She was not anyone I knew. Behind her, a man shouted, "Careful with the frames!" And 2 labourers staggered out with my old mirror, the one that made me taller on days I needed to be. Then I heard another voice, low and efficient. It dropped into the night like a pebble into water, ripples reaching exactly where they meant to. "Set the jewellery chest aside," it said. "It's going with me directly." I went cold. I knew that voice. I had known it when it learned to say Ami, and when it lied for the first time about breaking the neighbour boy's toy. I had sung it to sleep. I had put ointment on the throat that now delivered orders with the ease of a man who believed the world obeyed him. Aslam. I froze when I heard that voice. Even in the hush of midnight, I could recognise my own child's tone, the same one that once called me Ami with warmth, now slicing through the dark like a knife. I felt Imran's hand on my shoulder, urging silence, but my breath betrayed me with a trembling gasp. There he was, my son, Aslam, dressed in polished clothes, his gold wristwatch flashing under the porch light, talking to a man in a pressed suit as if he owned the world, or at least what was left of mine. "Keep that chest safe," he said to the mover. "There are antiques inside. We'll auction some and melt the rest. The buyer wants quick liquidation." Melt the rest. The words echoed through me like the sound of a temple bell struck in grief. The jewellery my husband gave me on our wedding night, the same ornaments that carried the touch of my mother, the blessings of generations, were now liquidation. I wanted to scream, to run across the street and shake him until he remembered who he was. But my voice caught behind my teeth. The shock was too heavy, the betrayal too sharp. Imran tugged at my sleeve. "We have to go, Auntie," he whispered. "If they see you—" But I didn't move. I couldn't. I stood rooted in that narrow street, watching the boy I had raised turn into a stranger. Then the woman came out, Rita, his wife, holding the same jewellery chest I had once kept locked under my bed. She was smiling, chatting casually. "We'll tell the home that Ami requested her things be stored safely. They don't check much anyway." And Aslam laughed. My son laughed. "By the time she asks again, she won't even remember she had them." That laughter broke something inside me. I stepped back into the shadows before my shaking could give me away. My heart hammered so loudly I thought it might draw attention itself. Imran's eyes met mine, terrified, protective. He guided me gently back to the motorbike, his hands firm, his movements urgent. We rode in silence through the sleeping city, the cold wind biting my cheeks until I could no longer tell whether I was crying or freezing. Every streetlight blurred into a streak of gold and white as the world spun around me. When we reached the home, Imran parked by the gate, but I couldn't move. "I saw him," I whispered. "He sold my soul." Imran looked at me like a man who wanted to fix the sky for someone. "Auntie," he said softly, "you're stronger than what they did." I shook my head. "No, beta. I'm just awake now, that's all." That night I didn't sleep at all. I sat by the small window in my room, clutching the folded paper of the forged signature in one hand and my husband's faded photograph in the other. His eyes, warm and steady, seemed to ask me, "What will you do now, Rahat? Will you let them bury you while you're still breathing?" By morning I had my answer. I began to write. Every detail I remembered, every name, every lie they told me. I wrote about the forged documents, the jewellery, the visit to the house, the sale. I listed the date of every transfer and the name of every person who had spoken to me since. I didn't know what I would do with it yet, but I knew that truth, once written, becomes harder to erase. When Shazia brought breakfast, she noticed the pile of papers and the fire in my eyes. "You didn't sleep," she murmured. "I saw them," I said. "They sold the house. They took everything." Her lips parted in shock, but I continued before she could speak. "I'm going to get it back." Shazia sat down, her voice trembling. "Auntie, you can't fight them alone. They have money, lawyers, influence." "Then I'll fight with what they don't have," I interrupted. "A mother's truth and a conscience that still wakes up at night." She looked at me like one looks at someone walking barefoot into fire. But she didn't stop me. She helped. Together we began gathering what little evidence we could. Imran found the security guard who had seen Aslam bring documents months ago. Shazia contacted her cousin, an assistant at a lawyer's office, who explained that if I could prove fraud and forged consent, I might stand a chance. But the system doesn't work easily for women like me. When I finally convinced the home administrator to let me go to town for medical paperwork, he insisted on sending a nurse along. That was fine. I only needed to reach the public records office. There, under the humming of old ceiling fans and the scratching of clerks' pens, I held the copy of my house's sale deed in my hands. My name was indeed there, smooth, precise, wrong. My heart ached seeing how neatly they had planned everything, how thoroughly they had erased me. I returned to the home with the document folded inside my shawl. That night I stared at it until my eyes burned, and then I laughed bitterly. They thought I'd forget, I whispered into the empty room. They thought memory fades like love. But they don't know. Mothers remember even what the world wants them to forget. Days passed. Aslam never called. Rida posted pictures on social media. Yes, even I managed to see them through Imran's old phone. Smiling in new clothes. A caption. Finally starting the new chapter of our lives. So much peace. Peace. Bought with my pain. I began to imagine confronting him. I would wait until he came to visit, maybe when the 6-month payment ran out. He would arrive with fake concern, pretending to care. I'd hand him the papers, look him in the eyes and ask him whether he still remembered the lullabies I used to sing. But fate, it seems, doesn't wait for our rehearsals. One rainy evening, as thunder cracked the sky in two, the home's receptionist came rushing into the hallway. "Auntie Rahat," she called. "Someone's here for you. Says he's your relative." My heart stopped. Could it be Aslam? Was he here to explain or to silence me? Shazia squeezed my hand. "Do you want me to stay?" "Yes," I whispered. "Don't leave my side." We walked toward the lobby. The air smelled of wet earth and betrayal. And there he was. Not Aslam. It was my younger son, Bilal, the one who had moved abroad years ago, who used to call me once every few months with quick words and distant affection. But his face, when he saw me, carried shock, guilt, and anger tangled together. "Ummi," he whispered, "what have they done to you?" Tears filled my eyes. I didn't need to answer. My silence told him everything. He took my trembling hands in his, eyes blazing. "I came because Aslam transferred my share of the house money. I thought you agreed to sell it. But then I saw the deed. It looked wrong. I called Sana and she said you were resting comfortably in care. So I flew here." The storm outside roared as if heaven itself had heard him. That was the first time in months I felt the smallest flicker of hope. Maybe not all my children had turned into strangers. Maybe one still remembered who I was. But I didn't know then. Hope, like betrayal, also comes softly. Sometimes to save you, sometimes to break you all over again. Bilal's voice trembled between fury and disbelief as he paced the small visitors' hall. Rain hammered the windows, lightning slicing the room into flashes of white and shadow. I sat quietly, watching him struggle to understand the cruelty of his own brother. It was like watching someone drown in water you've already survived. "Ummi," he said, running a hand through his hair, "you're telling me Aslam forged your signature. He took your jewelry, sold the house." I nodded, my eyes fixed on the rain, "and locked me here under the name of care." Bilal sank into the chair across from me, his hands clenched. I knew he was greedy, but this is evil. He looked at me, his face twisting. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I had no one to tell," I said quietly. "My calls were blocked, my phone taken. They said you were too busy abroad, that you'd agreed with everything." He looked wounded, as if the lie had been carved into his own flesh. "I never agreed. I thought you were living with Aslam, happy and safe. He even sent me pictures, fake ones I see now. How could I have been so blind?" I reached across the table and touched his hand. "You weren't blind, Bitter. You were trusting. That's the difference. I was the same once." For a moment, silence filled the room. Just the sound of rain and two people trying to piece together a shattered life. Then Bilal stood abruptly. "We're not leaving it like this. I'll take you home tonight." "There is no home," I said, the words tasting like ash. He turned to me, his jaw tightening. Then we'll build one again. But first, we'll get justice. The next morning, Bilal went to the property registration office. I waited with Shazia in the cafeteria, unable to eat, staring at the clock until hours lost meaning. When Bilal finally returned, his face was pale with rage. "You were right," he said through clenched teeth. "The sale deed was filed with forged consent. The lawyer was Rida's cousin. They registered the property under a shell company, but Aslam withdrew the payment into his own account. I have the copies." I felt both triumph and heartbreak. The proof was real, but so was the betrayal. "And the jewellery?" I asked. He hesitated. "Pawned. Most of it melted already. They filed insurance claims pretending it was stolen." For a moment the world blurred. My chest tightened until I thought I might faint. Shazia rushed for water, but I waved her off. "No," I whispered. "Let me feel it. Let me feel everything they did. I won't numb myself anymore." Bilal knelt beside me. "We'll fix this, Ami. I'll take him to court. I'll make him pay." I looked into my son's eyes, the one who still saw me as something more than a burden, and I smiled faintly. Court can't give back memories, Bitter, but maybe it can stop him from stealing anyone else's. That evening we went to a lawyer, an old friend of Bilal's father who still remembered Yusuf with respect. The man listened quietly as Bilal spoke, his eyes narrowing with every detail. Then he turned to me and said, "You have enough evidence to file a fraud and elder abuse case. But it will be ugly. Family cases always are." "I've lived through uglier," I said. Within a week, the papers were filed. Summons were issued. The news reached Aslam faster than we expected. He didn't call me, he called Bilal. I was sitting by the window when Bilal's phone rang. He put it on speaker. "Bilal," Aslam's voice thundered. "Have you lost your mind? You filed a case against your own brother." Bilal's voice was cold. "Against a thief, not a brother." "How dare you?" Aslam shouted. "You think that old woman remembers anything? She's sick. She signed everything willingly. We did it for her safety." I felt my blood boil. I snatched the phone from Bilal's hand. "Say it to my face, Aslam," I cried. "You took everything your father and I built. You lied, you forged, you buried me alive. For what? Money? A few pieces of gold?" There was silence on the other end. Then Aslam's tone shifted, calm, manipulative. "Ummi, please. You don't understand. Rida and I were under pressure. Debts. You wouldn't have helped if we asked. We only needed to use the house for a while. We were going to buy it back for you later." "Stop lying," I said, my voice breaking. "You were never poor. You were greedy." He sighed. "You're being poisoned by Bilal. You've always loved him more, haven't you?" That accusation sliced through me. I had spent my whole life balancing their needs, loving them equally, believing love could fix their differences. And now one of them weaponized it against me. "You don't get to twist love into guilt," I said quietly. "You already traded it for a few pieces of gold." Then I ended the call. The following weeks were a blur of hearings, signatures, statements. The media caught wind of the story. Elderly woman accuses son of property fraud. I saw my own face in the newspaper once, under a headline that made me both proud and ashamed. People at the home whispered when I walked by, half pitying, half admiring. Aslam and Rida arrived at the first court hearing dressed in arrogance. They avoided my eyes. Their lawyer argued I was senile, manipulated by Bilal. But the judge asked for handwriting experts. When the experts confirmed the signature was forged, I saw Aslam's confidence falter for the first time. Still, he didn't apologize. Not once. After the hearing, Bilal helped me into the car. "You did it, Ammi," he said softly. "You stood your ground." But I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow, like a tree that had survived the storm but lost its leaves. That night, as I sat alone in my room, Shazia brought me tea and whispered, "You're brave, Auntie. Many women never get this far." I smiled faintly. Bravery is just grief that decided to stand up. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the moonlight fell on the garden path like a quiet promise. But deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. There was still something Bilal didn't know, something I had hidden even from myself. Because sometimes, betrayal doesn't end with what others do to you. Sometimes it ends with what you finally admit you did to them. And the truth I was about to reveal would change everything. The truth has a way of waiting for the right silence before it finally demands to be heard. That night, after the court hearing, when Bilal had fallen asleep in the visitor's room, I sat awake on the narrow bed, watching the curtain flutter with each sigh of wind. I had spent weeks fighting for justice against one son, but deep inside, I carried a secret about why he had become that way. And if I didn't tell it now, I feared the truth would die with me, leaving behind only bitterness between brothers. I looked at Bilal's sleeping face. He looked so much like his father when he was young, gentle, steady, honest. But even honesty can sometimes be born from another person's sin. I whispered into the dark, more to my own heart than to him. It wasn't always Aslam who betrayed first. When Aslam was 10 and Bilal was just 4, our lives were very different. Yusuf and I were struggling then. His shop was failing, debts mounting. We had a small amount of family jewellery, part of my dowry, and it was all that stood between us and ruin. I remember the day I took those gold bangles to the moneylender. Aslam had followed me secretly, hiding behind the doorframe. I pawned them to save the house, without telling Yusuf. When he found out, he was furious. He shouted, accused me of betraying his pride. I remember slapping my hand on the table and crying, "Pride doesn't feed children!" The argument burned through the night. And in that fire, a small boy, our son, watched his parents teach him 2 different lessons, one about pride and one about survival. That night, Aslam came to me crying. "Ammi, Baba said you stole from him," he whispered. "Did you?" I wiped his tears and said, "No, beta, I borrowed what was already ours." He looked at me for a long moment, confused but trusting. Then he said something that haunts me to this day. "Then it's okay to take what's ours back, even if someone says no." At the time, I thought nothing of it. He was just a child, repeating words he didn't understand. But now, sitting in this cold care home decades later, I realized I had planted the first seed of his greed myself, teaching him that love could justify theft, that taking from family could still be right. When Bilal woke up at dawn, I told him everything. He listened quietly, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the wall as I spoke of that long-ago night, of the fights, of how Aslam grew up believing that money equaled control, and control equaled safety. "So you think this is your fault?" Bilal asked, his voice low. "I know it," I whispered. "A mother shapes her sons even when she doesn't mean to." I gave him a reason to believe that love excuses wrongs. Maybe he just perfected what he learned from me. Bilal shook his head sharply. "No, Ami, that's not your fault. You taught him sacrifice. He turned it into selfishness. There's a difference." But his words didn't soothe me, because guilt, once it finds a home inside a mother's chest, never really leaves. Later that morning, I received a letter delivered by hand. No envelope, just a folded piece of paper with my name written in Aslam's handwriting. My fingers trembled as I opened it. "Ami, you may hate me now, but I never wanted to hurt you. I only wanted what I thought was rightfully ours. Baba left debts you never told us about. You loved Bilal because he stayed innocent, but I was the one who stayed and fought with you through those years. You made me strong, and in your silence, You taught me that strength means taking what you can before the world takes it first. I'm sorry if I went too far. Aslam. The words hit me like stones. There was no true apology there, just justification, a twisted echo of my own lessons. I sat staring at the page for a long time. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in my diary beside my husband's photo. You see, Yusuf, I whispered, we both failed him, in our own ways. Bilal found me sitting like that hours later. The lawyer called, he said. They're scheduling the next hearing. The judge might freeze Aslam's assets until it's over. I nodded absently, but my mind was somewhere else. Bilal, I said, I need to see him. He blinked. See Aslam? After everything? Yes, not to forgive, to understand. 2 days later, I saw my eldest son again. Not in my house, not in a courtroom, but in a small detention cell where he had been summoned for questioning. The sight of him through the glass hit me like a gust of cold air. He looked thinner, angrier, but still carried that same stubborn pride his father once wore. He didn't look at me at first. He looked at Bilal, and then down at the table. I walked closer until the guard stepped aside. Aslam, I said softly, it's me. He finally met my eyes. For a moment his expression faltered. Something human flickered there. Then he exhaled sharply. You won, Ami. Are you happy now? I shook my head. I didn't come to win or lose. I came to ask you one thing. He smirked bitterly. What's left to ask? Do you remember the night I pawned my bangles? That made him pause. His eyes shifted, uncertain. Why bring that up now? Because that night I taught you something wrong, I said quietly. I taught you that stealing from love is acceptable when it's for survival. You just took that lesson and removed the love. He stared at me, speechless. The silence stretched until his shoulders slumped slightly. You think this is my fault, he muttered, almost to himself. I did everything I could to make sure we never had to beg again. You taught me never to be weak. I taught you to fight the world, I said, not your own blood. Something cracked in his voice. Then why did you always look at Bilal like he was the good one? Why was I the one who had to prove himself every day? I took a deep breath. Because you reminded me of your father. Strong, proud, stubborn. And I was afraid of losing you the way I lost him, to pride. He looked down, his jaw trembling slightly, then whispered, I didn't mean for it to go this far, Ami. I just wanted to feel powerful for once, to stop being the one who watched others decide everything. Tears slipped down my cheeks. And now? Do you feel powerful? He shook his head slowly. No, just empty. For the first time, I saw my son, the boy beneath the greed, the man beneath the arrogance. Not a villain, not a monster. Just a child who grew up with too much hunger and too little grace. When the guard said our time was over, I touched the glass gently. You can still make it right, Aslam. Return what you can, speak the truth in court. That will be the first real strength you've ever shown. He didn't answer, but as I turned to leave, I heard him whisper, I'm sorry, Ami. And though it was quiet, it was real. The final hearing came on a morning painted in dull grey, the kind of day that feels heavy with unfinished prayers. I sat in the courtroom beside Bilal, clutching the edge of my shawl like it was the last thread tying me to this world. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was tired, calm, like an ocean after the storm. Aslam sat across the room with his lawyer, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. His arrogance had drained away, leaving a pale outline of the man who once ruled my home like a king. Rita wasn't there. She had filed for separation 2 days before. Betrayal has a way of eating its own children. The judge entered, his robes rustling like pages closing on a story too long. The proceedings began. Bilal's lawyer presented the handwriting reports, the forged documents, the jewelry sale records. Every piece of evidence was a mirror held up to Aslam's lies. And then the judge asked, "Does the accused wish to speak before the verdict?" I looked at Aslam, praying silently that he would. He stood, his hands trembling. The courtroom fell into that peculiar hush that only truth can summon. He said, voice low but steady, "Everything they said is true. I forged my mother's signature. I sold her house, her jewelry, everything. I thought I was fixing our lives, but I was only destroying the one person who ever truly loved me. I don't ask for mercy. I just want my mother to know I finally understand what strength really means." His words echoed, and for a long moment no one moved. The judge's gavel came down softly, almost respectfully. "Given the confession and evidence," he said, "the court sentences the accused to 5 years imprisonment and orders full restitution of misappropriated funds and property to the complainant." The room buzzed with murmurs. I didn't hear them. I only heard Aslam's voice, broken but honest. For the first time in years, I saw my son again, not the stranger who sold my memories, but the little boy who once clung to my sari during thunderstorms. As the guards led him away, he turned to look at me. "Ummi," he whispered. It wasn't a plea, it wasn't defiance. It was a word heavy with years of lost warmth. I nodded. "Allah forgive you, beta," I said softly. "And forgive me too." He smiled faintly before disappearing behind the courtroom doors. Afterward, Bilal drove me back to the care home. The jasmine outside had started to bloom again, stubbornly sprouting from roots someone had once tried to tear away. I sat by the window, watching the wind move through the branches, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a prisoner. I felt free. In the weeks that followed, I moved out of the care home into a small apartment Bilal rented nearby. It wasn't grand or polished, but it had sunlight that fell on the curtains in the same way it once did in my old house. I kept a small photograph of Yusuf on the table and a framed one of both my sons beside it. Because despite everything, they were both parts of me, the sinner and the savior, the wound and the cure. Sometimes Bilal would visit in the evenings, bringing groceries or just sitting quietly, reading the newspaper while I cooked. Life had become soft again, like the hush between two songs. Yet, inside, I still carried the ache of what could never be undone. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Aslam's. My fingers trembled as I opened it. "Ummi, prison isn't what I expected. It's quieter. There's time to think. I'm working in the library now, teaching some of the boys to read. For the first time, I feel useful for something that doesn't destroy others. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll earn it, slowly. Bilal came to see me once. He didn't speak much, but I saw in his eyes that you're safe. That's all I needed. Please don't waste your days remembering what I did. Remember who I was before I lost my way. And if the jasmine still blooms outside your window, know that I planted one seed of it years ago when you weren't looking. Maybe that's why it never died. Your son, Aslam." Tears rolled down my cheeks, blurring the ink. I looked out the window at the blooming jasmine and laughed through the sobs. That stubborn flower, it had survived everything, just like me. Months passed, seasons turned. Life found its rhythm again. I visited Aslam once in prison. He had changed, the arrogance gone, replaced by quiet remorse. He told me he was helping other inmates write letters to their families, helping them reconnect. "Maybe if we all write enough, truth," he said softly, "we can erase some lies." I smiled, proud and broken all at once. "Then write, Beta. Write until you find peace. When I returned home that evening, I felt lighter. For the first time, forgiveness didn't feel like surrender, it felt like freedom. Years later, when Aslam was released, he didn't move back with us. He started a small repair shop in another city, sending me short letters every few weeks. "Still sober," one read. "Still working," another said, and once, simply, "Still your son." Bilal visited often, always with quiet care. Sometimes he'd bring his own children, who called me Dadi, and filled the house with laughter that sounded like redemption. I tell them stories, not of betrayal or loss, but of love's endurance, of how even broken families can find ways to heal if one heart keeps beating for the others. One evening, many years later, I sat on my porch under the fading light, my hands folded in my lap, watching the jasmine sway in the breeze. The scent reminded me of everything I had been through, the love, the pain, the forgiveness that cost so much yet gave me everything. People often ask me now, "How did you survive such betrayal?" And I smile and say, because even when your children forget who you are, a mother never forgets who they were. And sometimes, that memory is strong enough to bring them home again. I leaned back, feeling the cool air touch my face, and whispered into the wind, "Youssef, we did it. Our sons finally learned what love means." The wind rustled the jasmine in reply, carrying its scent through the quiet night. And for the first time in years, I closed my eyes not in grief, but in peace.